got the reactor link! Why won't it disconnect?
Because you turned my station into your biggest mistake.
10,000 worlds burned before anyone thought to ask if Earth would fight back. The Threshold Empire didn't send warnings. They sent verdicts. For 300 years, their harvesting fleets had moved from star to star like locusts wearing crowns, and every species they met had done exactly what the data predicted. They knelt, or they died screaming. Humans, the Empire's analysts concluded after a single decade of quiet observation, would do both. The report was blunt. Humanity fought itself more than it fought outsiders. It wasted resources on art no one could eat. It had no unified fleet, no planetary shield grid, no weapon that could scratch the hull of a threshold cruiser. On the strategic map, at Fleet Command, Earth was marked with the lowest resistance rating ever assigned to an inhabited world. A single red digit, too. Mara Voss didn't know any of that yet. She knew the hum of Halden Station's old reactor core, the one she'd kept alive for 6 years with spare parts and stubbornness. She knew the sound of her little brother Eli's laugh through the comm line, 3,000 kilometers away on the surface, asking her, again, when she was coming home for his birthday. She knew the ache in her shoulders after a double shift, and the quiet pride of being the only technician on this rusting mining platform who could coax one more year out of machines the corporation had already written off. Halden Station wasn't important. It orbited a dying asteroid belt on the edge of nowhere, staffed by 40 people the rest of humanity had mostly forgotten. That was exactly why the Threshold Empire chose it first. At 0347 station time, every alarm on Halden screamed at once. Mara looked up from her console, heart slamming, and watched 3 shapes fall out of the dark like judgment. The first ship didn't fire. It didn't need to. It simply opened a channel, and a voice filled every speaker on the station, smooth, unhurried, almost bored. This structure is now property of the Threshold. Compliance ensures survival. Resistance ensures nothing. Commander Threll Vashon watched Halden Station through his viewport the way a man watches an insect he hasn't decided whether to crush. He had conquered 41 worlds personally. He had never once needed a second warning. His crew didn't bother arming weapons at first. Boarding pods launched instead, gray and silent, latching onto the station's outer hull like ticks finding skin. The first stage of the nightmare was simple. Soldiers in black armor cut through the airlocks and swept the station corridor by corridor, herding terrified crew into the mess hall at gunpoint. Mara watched it happen on the security feed from the reactor control room, her hands shaking over the console. The second stage was worse. Vashon's engineers accessed the station's mainframe and began stripping its systems. Not just data, but control, life support, gravity, the reactor itself. Halden Station wasn't being conquered. It was being harvested, piece by piece, while its people still breathed inside it. Then came the moment of false hope. Mara found an emergency channel still open, a thread of static reaching toward a human patrol corvette 2 systems away. She sent the distress call with trembling fingers, watched the signal crawl outward, and for one heartbeat let herself believe help was coming. The reply came back 40 seconds later, garbled and final. The corvette had already been destroyed. There was no cavalry. There was no plan B. Vashon's voice returned over the station intercom, colder now. Your reactor technician has been flagged as non-compliant. Locate her. Bring her to me. The rest of you have 90 seconds to decide whether she dies alone. Mara heard footsteps in the corridor outside the control room, heavy, armored, unhurried, because they already believed they had won. She looked at the reactor core status on her screen, at Eli's photo taped to the corner of her monitor, and made a choice no Threshold analyst had ever accounted for. Inside the lead Threshold cruiser, a systems officer frowned at his console. Something was wrong with the harvested data feed from Halden Station's reactor. A fluctuation, small and strange, buried under normal-looking readings. He almost dismissed it as decay in old human machinery. He was wrong. Mara Voss had spent 6 years learning that reactors, every flaw, every quirk, every trick it could be coaxed into performing. The Threshold engineers had seized control of its output systems, but they hadn't touched its containment architecture, because their own scans said it was too primitive to matter. They hadn't accounted for a human who understood the machine better than the machine understood itself. She wasn't going to blow it up. That would kill everyone on the station, Eli's sister included. Instead, she did something colder and far more precise. She fed the stolen power conduits. The ones now running straight into the boarding pods and weapon relays the threshold had connected to Steel Halden's energy, a pulse the reactor was never designed to give. A resonant spike, tuned exactly to the frequency of alien shielding technology her scanners had been quietly reading for the last 90 seconds. On the cruiser, lights flickered, then died. Vashin felt it before he understood it. A shudder through the deck, subtle as a held breath. "Report," he snapped. Power draw spiking through the boarding conduits, his officer said, voice rising in disbelief. Source is the station reactor. It's feeding back into our systems. Cut the connection." "I can't. The coupling is fused." She overloaded the interface on purpose. For the first time in 41 conquests, Threll Vashin felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest. Doubt. He watched, helpless, as one by one his boarding pods went dark, their armored soldiers trapped inside disabled suits, his own bridge systems screaming warnings his crew had never been trained to silence. The primitive reactor his analysts had rated a non-threat had just turned his own greed, his own hunger to strip the station bare, into the weapon that broke him. In the control room, Mara collapsed against the console, ears ringing, smoke curling from a blown panel beside her. Outside the viewport, she watched the threshold cruiser's running lights stutter and fail, section by section, like a candle finally giving up against the wind. She was still holding Eli's photo when the emergency lights kicked back on. By the time the human patrol fleet arrived 4 hours later, the threshold ships were adrift, stripped of power, their boarding parties disarmed by station crew who'd found their frozen weapons useless without a live suit link. Commander Vashin surrendered his sidearm with a hand that hadn't stopped shaking. He was brought, under guard, past the reactor control room. Through the shattered doorway, he saw her. The technician his own report had called non-compliant. Ordinary. Exhausted. Human. "You should not have been possible," he said quietly. Not quite a question. Mara didn't look up from the panel she was already repairing. "You should have read the fine print," she said. "We don't need bigger guns. We just know our own machines better than you ever bothered to learn them." Word of Halden Station reached Threshold Fleet Command within the week, and it did not stay contained. Analysts who had once assigned Earth a resistance rating of 2 were quietly ordered to revise it. Commanders who had laughed at the file began requesting it be read aloud in briefings, just to understand how 40 unarmed civilians had disabled 3 warships without firing a single weapon. Across a dozen border systems, the story spread the way fear always spreads among conquerors, quietly, insistently, refusing to be unheard. For the first time in 300 years, an occupied world sent no envoy of surrender. It sent a warning instead. 2 weeks later, Mara finally made it home. Eli met her at the transit dock, and the first thing he did, before hello, before are you okay, was throw his arms around her and hold on like he wasn't sure the universe would let him do it twice. She laughed, the sound a little rough, a little disbelieving, and pressed her face into his shoulder. "Happy almost birthday," she whispered. "You're insane, you know that," he said, pulling back to look at her, equal parts furious and proud. "You fought off an alien invasion with a reactor." Mara shrugged, tired and steady, the ache in her shoulders finally starting to fade. "I didn't fight an empire," she said. "I just protected my station." Turns out that was enough. Behind her, on every screen in the transit hub, the news kept playing. Ships adrift, an empire humbled, a name nobody outside a mining platform had known a month ago. 10,000 worlds had taught the Threshold Empire that conquest was inevitable. Earth was about to teach them the meaning of never again.